And again, welcome everybody here to talk about the industry of home care and how it's changing right before our eyes with the crisis. And maybe not just the crisis. I think it was starting to change beforehand. But the main topic is a business that's changing before our eyes. Yeah, the topics, the takeaways here is navigating in-home care during this time and what it looks like and some strategies for how to get around it. I've been doing in-home care with Home to Stay for over 11 years, and my business partner, Gary Skoll, has been doing in-home care for 32 years. So, both of us, Gary obviously has a lot more experience than I do, but we both have a lot of experience. And, really with the virus, and especially over the last 6-7 months, we saw the business shift. And, mostly shifted primarily because of the labor market. And one of the things that happened was that even before the virus, in 2011, 2012, the number one threat to this industry was the workforce. And as you could see here from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation in 2001, low wages and benefits, hard working conditions, and a job that has been stigmatized by society makes worker recruitment and retention difficult. And that was in 2001. So you could imagine what it looks like today, 20 years later, in the teeth of a virus, where it scared people away from working with seniors because they were afraid of maybe getting sick themselves. It scared people away from going into buildings and like assisted livings and skilled nursing facilities, once again, because it was scary and they didn't want to subject themselves to maybe getting the virus, taking it home to their family members. Makes perfect sense. Add on top of that childcare issues, daycares closing down, schools closing down, and here we are on the cusp of a new school year, and those challenges have gotten better, but they still exist. And those things combined, with the Robert Wood Johnson research from 20 years ago has just really created this perfect storm of a labor shortage. And it's really interesting. And what's really interesting is how many just people are unemployed. We're, as an agency, we increased our pay rates almost 100%, probably like 60-70% through the crisis. They've gone up. Our bill rates have not kept up with that, but we've had a 60-70% increase in pay. That still hasn't solved the problem. We have all types of hours available, and as I like to say, a pot for every lid. An overnight shift, a live-in shift, morning shift, all kinds of hours available to make it flexible and easy. That hasn't solved the problem. Our phone, we maybe get 20, 25 referrals a week for new business, people looking for care. And, we're just not able to help them. And it's so frustrating talking to families, hearing their struggles. Been working with one family in particular for the last 6 weeks and trying to get the wife home to be with her husband. And we couldn't do it. We had care for the husband. We needed separate caregivers for the wife. I personally reached out to 10 agencies, just trying to give the case away, trying to loop them in, and we couldn't do it. And, that client passed away this past weekend with his wife not home. And, that's the reality of this situation. And where it really becomes concerning when you start looking forward is that this is a population that needs help today in 2021, and it's only going to grow. By the time 2028 rolls around, which is, a mere 7 years away, right now, there's probably about 2 million plus minus paid caregivers in the United States doing this type of work. And in 7 years, that number is going to double. We're going to need about 4 million to meet the current demands. So what are we going to do? What's going to happen? What's going to happen to these families that need help, that want to age in place, that want to stay home? Even if you go to one of the lovely buildings that are out there, and they do such good work at the buildings today with activities, companionship, ease of use. Even the buildings are struggling with these same challenges. So what are we going to do? I can tell you is from our industry, from our standpoint, one of the researching this, really looking at this, according to John Hale, a researcher and author from the Midwest, he mentions that caregivers are leaving this industry in droves because of a lack of respect for these occupations, and the treatment afforded to persons in these occupations does not reflect their status as important stakeholders on the care team. Hale goes on to say that their contributions are devalued, ignored, often not sought out, and the compensation does not match the difficulty and demanding nature of their job. And I think that's a really important part for our industry and for this issue that we're talking about today, which is this new look of home care and what we can do. I feel, and not just my feeling, but it's also supported by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, but that the home health aid industry has really been disproportionately affected by this crisis. The home health aid industry has really been disproportionately affected by this crisis. And, if you look at, again, what researcher Hale says is that, a lot of things that happened during, the crisis is that people had a chance to take a step back, reevaluate where they want to go, what they want to do with their lives, and, maybe working with sick seniors that could pass on the virus, having a lack of respect, not being treated as an important stakeholder on the care team. That's all impacting this in spades. It reminds me of a case that we had some years ago, and we were with this family. We had one caregiver the entire time. We were with this family for 60 hours a week, which is a lot of time, and one caregiver. And what I remember about that case was that they were getting ready to move this woman into an assisted living. And before they did that, they were working with a physician, somewhere, pick a big institution, Penn Memory, Jefferson, one of those. And this person, the physician they were working with, really saw mom once a year for 15 minutes and was never in the home. And our caregiver was at the appointment with this family, and they were talking about transitional care for mom when she went into the assisted living. And the physician, said, well, I don't think it's necessary. And our caregiver that spent 60 hours a week with this woman had spoken up and said that she does think that maybe it would be a good idea, because Mrs. Smith, because of being afraid of new situations and new people, to maybe have a wind down period with her. And what I remember was, them coming out of the meeting, and the daughters couldn't call me up quick enough, could not call home to stay and ask for me quick enough to let me know how disappointed they were that my caregiver had the audacity to speak up and say something to a big doctor at Penn Memory. They couldn't believe it. They were shocked. And I remember, that situation, it was years ago, but, speaking about it now, it was thinking about it with, that caregiver was an important stakeholder on that woman's care team. And again, she didn't have a voice. She was marginalized because she was just a caregiver. And that's, that's what's happening, that attitude of they're just caregivers. This is an industry that's mostly women, it's mostly minorities, and it's a lot of immigrants. That's the reality of the nature of this workforce. The 2 million plus, that's the backbone of this industry that's carrying it. And it's an industry that is marginalized. And it's an industry now that's taking a step back and saying, I can do something else. And we're seeing the ramifications of that now. So what are you going to do? Mom still needs care. We still need to provide care. This problem is not going away. It's only going to grow. The need for care is only going to get bigger. And we don't know when the labor force is going to be back, if it'll be back to this industry. So what are some strategies that we can do? So one big thing is to be flexible. As you're working with your own families, you're working with families, maybe you're in a social worker, working with families that are trying to get home. Having to be as flexible as you can is very important. Before the crisis, before, this was an issue, a lot of times we're schedule driven. This is a schedule driven industry. I need someone because I'm going to work in Cherry Hill. I have to leave no later than 7:30. So I need the caregiver here at 7:30. I'm going to be home about 5:36. So I need them to stay till at least 6. That's what I need. And that's understandable. And that's why it's why there's a need for home to stay in other agencies like them. But the reality is, if you could, advising your families to be flexible, give us some time. You need someone during the day. Okay, I can't have a caregiver there at 9, but I can have someone at 10, or I can have someone there at 7:30. They can't stay till 5:30. They can stay till 4, and this is what they can do. So really trying to be as flexible as possible is going to be key for this. And again, I know it's a schedule-driven business, but a lot of times that flexibility is going to be key. Another point, it's pretty simple, but is kindness. And I'm sure we've all heard maybe this saying through this crisis about, especially I can analogize it to the restaurant industry. And, at least be kind to those that showed up. At least be kind to those that showed up. I can tell you that some of our biggest staffing issues that we struggle with are with some of our bigger cases where we need 6, 7 full-time caregivers to care for one person. And when you have that many care partners on a team, you're going to have different personalities. And in the past, before, when there was a plethora of caregivers available, it was easy to say maybe, well, this one wasn't as responsive as I needed them to be, so I never want them back. This one was, 3 minutes late and 10 minutes late, and that's not acceptable. Don't send them back. This one smelled like smoke, and I think she's a smoker. I don't want her back. And that's the world we live in. But being too rigid like that is only going to cross you out of caregivers and impede your ability to get care. So I'm saying it's important not to lower your standards, not to go out of your comfort zone, but just really try to be kind to those that showed up, be flexible. And in this world, in our HR team, our nurse, it's more about coaching up as opposed to pushing out. It's more about coaching a person up that's willing to be there and work on, okay, you know what, you're smoking. It's really important that you maybe change your shirt before you go in with Mrs. Smith, and not just go in after having a cigarette in the car because the smoke irritates her, and trying to have a win-win situation like that. Please try to be a little bit more attentive when Mrs. Smith needs you, as opposed to saying, don't come back because you weren't right there when I needed you. So be kind, be flexible, and be understanding is a very important message to get through this crisis. The other thing is that it takes a team. And pulling together and networking with other agencies. So if you're a social worker, a nurse, a discharge planner, you're working with a family and they're going home and they need 40 hours, 80 hours, 168 hours, that's full-time coverage, 24 times 7, 168 hours in a week. That's a type of work that we do a lot of. And they're the types of, where you need 5 to 7 full-time caregivers. They're the types of cases that are really difficult to start now, because if you have half the shifts filled, you only have half the shifts filled and you can't bring that person home. So one strategy that I really recommend is networking with multiple agencies. And it's interesting, in the past, before the crisis, something I would have said the opposite. Because before this, we were in this situation, that 168-hour case, the 84-hour case, they're the cases that really get the attention of an agency. They're, the A cases where you really put all your resources and you're going to make sure that they're happy. And so if you trifurcate that workload, the case isn't as important and you maybe don't get as best as the level of service that you would have got if you kept the case together. But now what we're seeing is to really split that case if you can, loop in another agency, connect them, have them work together. Yesterday our team, we were working on a really important case, and having now that the virus is back with the Delta variant, it feels like the fall again. But someone goes out of state, they didn't realize it, but they have to quarantine now. And instead of going back to work, they're home for a week, and families are expecting help. Families need help. In this situation, someone could have lost their job if they weren't able to show up. And in this situation, we worked with another agency, and we were able to get it done, and at the last minute. So it was a great success, and really recommend encouraging your families, encouraging your discharge planners, care managers, nurses to work together with other agencies. I've often said that this is not a zero-sum game. For those that are in the industry, and when we go to our marketing events and you're going around the room, and if there's 30 attendees there, 10 of them, a third of them may be home care agencies. And by the time you get to the 10th, everyone's snickering and giggling, hey, there's another home care agency. You know what? There should be 15, 20, and there's still not enough. So we work as agencies, for the most part, we all work together exceptionally well. Again, it's not a zero-sum game. I'm not taking from you, you're not taking from me. There's enough for everybody. So let's work together. And the agencies that understand that more are going to be the ones that do better. So we touched on being flexible with your schedule. We touched on being kind and being understanding with your caregivers. We talked about networking with other agencies and bringing multiple players in. And then, the last one is, the last strategy is that working with family caregivers, and, not just relying on your agency, having trained family caregivers ready to go. There's good training out there. The Red Cross has training. The All's Better program has family training. The Alzheimer's Association has some training. But being in a position, not just relying on outside help, but getting your family caregivers coached up and ready to go. That's going to be a very important component in solving this crisis and getting through that. What does that mean? It means the granddaughter that just graduated college, and maybe she's looking for a job, but while she's looking for work, having her get some training so she can help grandma. It means, the cousin that maybe you only see at 2 or 3 times a year, but you know they're not working, reaching out to that family member, getting them, and suggesting they get trained up, but looping in more people. As you can see here, a lot of family caregivers have outside jobs, almost 3/4 of them. But something has to give. And I think family caregivers going forward are going to be fill a huge part of that gap of the 2 million caregivers that this industry needs to add over the next 7 years, as people are already leaving the industry. Then the last thing is, looked at, as I mentioned earlier, about pay increases. The last thing here is that, to a degree, this is a supply and demand issue. There's a high demand of people needing in-home services and a low supply of caregivers. So what do you do in that situation? Supply and demand. Let's increase the pay rate, and that's going to help the situation. We've done that, as I said earlier. It's helped tremendously, but it hasn't solved it. It's not the one magic bullet that's going to make this go away. So one of the things, just be prepared. Please be prepared not for price increases in this industry, because that's certainly going to be a piece of the puzzle in solving this crisis. So before I kind of turn it over to some questions, just in review, the strategies that we talked about. We're being flexible with your schedule. Sometimes you have to be rigid, but if you can have some flexibility, that's going to go a long way. Be kind and appreciative of the ones that do show up, and try to be a little bit more understanding with your rigidity and what you will accept and what you won't accept. I'm not asking you to, accept something that really goes against your constitution, but just try to be that flexible and try to work with your caregivers that are showing up. We also talked about working with multiple agencies. It's not a zero-sum game here, and pulling in other resources. And that's worked really well for Home to Stay and the partners we work with. Lastly is working and training up your family caregivers and getting them trained and ready to go. And then last is to be prepared for a price increase in the industry. I thank everyone for attending today, and I now welcome any questions or comments.
Hey, Andrew, this is Walt. We had a anonymous question in the chat. Is the hiring crisis ending anytime soon?
Yeah, so Mr. Anonymous or Mrs. Anonymous, that's a great question. And not sure. I mean, some people, the conventional wisdom, a lot of people will point to some of the government programs, the unemployment, those types of things, and they're supposed to be winding down, and people think it'll throw a light switch and that this labor force will return. We're just not sure, because of the research of John Hale, how people, especially in this industry, being disproportionately affected. We're just not sure. Any other questions?
A reminder to those of you who may have joined late, we are all on mute, so you'll just need to unmute yourself before you ask a question.
Andrew, I have a question. Christopher Sheehan here. Is there any program for worker visas for home care work?
That's a great question, Chris. And, because, other industries have addressed their labor issue through that. And I haven't, thank you. That's something that we'll look into. I know some people have looked into it due to the regulations with certifications and New Jersey having to work with certified home health aides in our industry. When you say that, Chris, I think of maybe I live in Salem County, and I know some really big industrial farms that rely on, an international workforce, that they have people dedicated to working with the visa programs, bringing them in, housing them, doing all that work. The difference here is that there's some certifications that are needed, but it's something that I think we'll look into more. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.